All right, so yesterday, guys, we talked about the Battle of Britain, and we mentioned about how Hitler's turning his attention to the only Allied power left, which is Britain. Right. So with that, he focused a lot of attention on maybe invading the island. No, he didn't do that. Right. He did something different, which caused a lot of harm, devastation. But one thing to note is that Britain held strong. So we're going to review this quick, and then we're going to talk about the United States' stance early on in this war. What are they doing? A whole lot of nothing. But we'll mention why. All right, so here you go. I'll give you guys some time. Thank you, Wyatt. Bodie and Madeline, you guys got to turn on that for Friday. All right. Okay. So as we mentioned about Hitler's expansion and moving here to the west, so we talked about how he moved to the Nordic countries first: Denmark, Norway, Sweden, for resources and to have an advantage on Great Britain. All right. Then we mentioned about how he took over France. How do you attack France again? Where did he go? How do you attack France? Brody Forge. Yes, through Belgium, right? What forest was that again? Remember? Chase? Ardennes. Yes, the Ardennes forest. Good. All right, so again, no one could really expect it. No one really thought that he marched his troops, his armored divisions, all these tanks through the wooded area, but he did so quick. And with that, Germany defeats France in how many days? How many days, or let's say weeks, maybe, Elena? Yeah, right. So it only took about 6 weeks, a little bit over a month. And well, France was defeated. So one thing here to note is that as Hitler takes over France, well, he's making sure he can propagandize it. He's having the film out and they, taking pictures in front of the Eiffel Tower and showing the whole world. That's going to boost again Germany's national pride back at home. So it looks like they're unstoppable. It really does. Anyway, what about Great Britain? Was there an operation, a plan to maybe take over the island, Great Britain, huh? This legendary country of Europe forever, right? And let's face it, been the strongest for a long, long time since we've been talking in this course. Jason? Operation Sea Lion. Yes, Operation Sea Lion, good. Anyway, there was a plan for Hitler to take England, but why did it happen? Why did it happen? Why didn't it go to, operation? Why didn't they fully go through with it? Chase?
Didn't take too long.
It would take really long. Good, okay. What else here? Austin?
They were really getting outgunned in the air.
Okay, yeah, right. So the Royal Air Force, Britain's Air Force, is pretty darn strong, which we found out with this battle. Right, we'll talk more about it here, obviously, but why else? They got to travel across water, huh? Jason?
The British Navy was so far the most powerful Navy up to now.
Yeah, good job. So at the start of the war here, Royal Navy still very strong, and for Germany, they can't compete against that. It would take a long time for them to build up the resources and materials to create these landing pods to get across the English Channel, and going up against the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy, well, it's a suicide mission. So Hitler decided to do something else in order to try to force Britain into surrendering. What did he do? What did he do here? Go ahead, Luna.
Oh, when Britain's soldiers were still in France, he would start bombing the soldiers.
Okay, all right. So yeah, the Dunkirk evacuation. We mentioned a little bit about that heroic move by Winston Churchill to get these troops back home with Operation Dynamo and using some of these civilian boats and obviously vessels here to get them back home. Okay, but how did he force them? Trying to, right? How did he try to force them into surrendering? He didn't invade them. He tried to do something different. Jason?
Like bomb the Britain itself.
Yeah, right. So he went and tried to bomb the crap out of them. What is this called here? This is like almost a year long, right? Where there's constant bombing runs and destruction all throughout Great Britain and their major cities. Chase?
Blitz.
The Blitz. Yes, right there. Good. And it's short for Blitzkrieg, right? Like warfare. So the Luftwaffe was constantly bombing these major cities for about 9-10 months, right? Almost a year long. Anyway, how did Britain survive? How did they survive? Again, Germany, the Luftwaffe was bombing at night too, which was going against rules of war. I know rules of war sound kind of crazy, but how did Britain survive? Aldrina.
Because Hitler was going after like cities where people were. He wasn't necessarily going after factories, so they were able to rebuild.
Excellent. Good job, Audrina. Yes. So, yeah, he targeted civilian areas like hospitals and schools. That sick son of a gun, right? And instead of manufacturing places and factories, industries, right? So the Royal Air Force continued to pump out these planes. And what else did they use? Which was really the first we see it utilized in warfare to see where these planes, the Luftwaffe, are coming from. Looks like you guys want to fight over it here. Oh, Blake's hand high. Go ahead.
Radar.
Yes, radar. Good job. So radar starts to come about here in World War II, and how the Royal Air Force, England, was trying to protect itself. Anyway, with these nighttime raids, okay, these bombing raids, what else did the British people do? What else did they do to try to survive here? Austin.
I think they would just send their children to rural areas.
Yes, the countryside, right? In order to try to protect them. But hey, we need to send you to these remote locations because they're targeting civilian areas. They're targeting these cities. So if you guys are up in these rural areas, then yeah, you'll be protected. So yeah, families are separated. Good. Where else did they go here? All right, Chase, he's on a roll.
The sewers.
Okay, the sewers, yeah, the subway tunnels, good. Deep underground here to try to protect themselves from the constant bombardment. All right, so yeah, can you imagine that months, maybe even a year a year long living deep underground here in the subway tunnels, in the tubes is what they called it, in order to try to protect themselves. It was terrible. You hear the sirens going each and every night, the lights flashing up in the sky to try to find where the Luftwaffe was striking. The Royal Air Force, which again did a really good job at taking out these Luftwaffe planes and bombers. So with radar, these planes, manufacturing, and England just keep on going, right? Not giving up. This allowed for England to survive. Not only survive, but win the Battle of Britain. And for Hitler, well, it pushed him to really just forget about the plans of trying to take over England. Let's face it though, England, are they much of a threat here as they're this island floating in the North Sea? Are they much of a threat to Hitler and his advancement into Europe? No, no, let's face it, right? This rock here, this island, it doesn't offer many resources, does it? No, more or less, he was just trying to get them to surrender for the pride of it. It's like, hey, not only did we take over France quick, but we took over England. So yeah, you can imagine, he wants this as a means of an ego boost, even more. Anyway, he gives up on it. So in 1941, he says, enough's enough, they're not giving up. And, oh, who was the leader of Great Britain that was helping them continue to fight, trying to promote to the parliament that, hey, we can't give up, we can't surrender. What was this guy's name? Ben?
Winston Churchill.
Yes, Winston Churchill, good. Again, I showed you guys a picture of him, kind of looks dumpy, right? He always has a cigar in his mouth. And, hey, why do you look back? What, are you kidding me? Does he think you look like Winston Churchill? Oh my gosh. Oh my, all right, that was kind of fun. All right, anyway, so with Winston Churchill, he's keeping them motivated, right? He's keeping them sound and grounded here in order to continue to fight on. All right, so we'll mention about it. Hitler's going to shift his attention to someone else, the true enemy of fascism, of Nazism, right? And who is that true enemy of the Nazis? Lance. Yes, good. The Soviet Union. Wait a minute, I thought Hitler had a non-aggression pact signed with us. Has he followed through on any of these agreements? No, he's a backstabbing son of a gun, isn't he? And now he's gonna backstab the Soviet Union here and launch his attack, which we're gonna mention more down the road. All right, real quick, last thing. England is reaching out, pleading to one country here for help. They need resources, they need weapons, they need loans to continue to ship their peacetime products to wartime products, and they're holding on by a thread. Elena? What did you say? Yes, America, good, United States. All right, so I'm gonna put up your terms here. We're gonna move on, and we're gonna actually look at the United States here now. What are they doing this whole time? A whole lot of nothing. Whole lot of nothing. All right, so we got FDR. We got the Neutrality Acts of the 1930s and the Lend-Lease Act. Okay, so you'll see there's multiple acts of the Neutrality Acts. As it looks like this war is just gonna blow up in the early 1930s and the mid 1930s. We'll mention about what happens here, what the United States does. Oh, remind me at the end of the class here, I wanted to show you 2 videos, so I forgot on that. So I'll show you at the end, yeah. All right, Brody? Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you. Tap in. Yep, Philip pass. All right, here we go. So Neutrality Acts. Oh, real quick. FDR. FDR is the president of the United States during the Great Depression and the longevity of World War II, up until pretty much the very end. So he'll pass away right before Nazi Germany surrenders, but it's like within a month or so. And with FDR, just note that he is the longest serving president ever, because of the Great Depression and because of World War II. So his terms in office, I know it sounds weird and strange, but he had like 12 years in office. 12! Unbelievable. So that's something to write down. And here he is up here. The rare, really at the end, closest to the flag. My laser pointer keeps going. All right. You gonna make fun of my height now too, since you're a big jokester? Yeah, right there. Okay. All right. So anyway, FDR, we'll mention about him too. He had polio, and he was actually in a wheelchair for majority of his life, especially towards the end. And he actually had to walk around with these braces. Okay, so these braces here in order to walk and stand and communicate to the American people through many of his speeches. So he's also, like I said, in a wheelchair, and they try to hide it from the people because during a time of need, during the Depression and World War II, at the time, they thought this was showing weakness. So they didn't show any pictures of him in any type of, cane or even in a wheelchair to try to protect the image of the United States being strong during this time of despair. So anyway, something interesting about it. Neutrality Acts, 1930s. So just make sure you guys know that the Neutrality Acts were acts, policies put out by Congress in order to try to prevent the United States from getting involved in another war. Right? The whole idea is not to let World War I happen again. So what were we doing before World War I? Were we trading left and right to everybody? Yes, we were. We're trading to both sides of the war. And as that trade happens, we're technically getting involved. Right? It was just a matter of time. You guys remember Single Lusitania? Yeah? You remember the unrestricted submarine warfare? Okay, so they're going to attack these ships and probably pull us in. Anyway, Congress is forbidding it. Right? Whatever country's at war with another, right? Let's say an aggressive nation is really duking it out with an alliance that we have with France or Great Britain. We can't trade with any of them, right? So are we good friends then? Are we good? I mean, not really. So if you're Great Britain and France, you look at the United States and say, help, please, and we can't help because these Neutrality Acts forbid us to. All right, real quick, FDR was not for it at all. He thought we need to try to keep peace. We need to make sure that we can be strong against these aggressive dictators here in Europe. And with the Neutrality Acts, we're just not doing it, okay? So we'll mention, it kind of handcuffs us. It prevents us from being a really strong ally, right, to France and Great Britain. And it prevents us from getting into war, which that's the whole point, I get that. But when France is getting taken over and Great Britain's holding on by a thread, we probably should step in, right? All right, last thing here, the Lend-Lease Act. So at the end of the 1930s, as it looks like we're getting involved in this war, right? It's inevitable. It's going to happen sooner or later. As the Lend-Lease Act, this is created, pushed by Congress, and it gives these powers to the President of the United States to trade with any country that's being attacked by an aggressive nation. So we were sending a lot of aid to the Soviet Union then, which we'll talk about. To Great Britain, yeah. And then to China, as Japan is conquering much of that land. So with the Lend-Lease Act, this is kind of unlocking the handcuffs like I was talking about. It gives the President of the United States a lot of power, like much that we've never seen before. And it gives them the opportunity to trade with countries that are being attacked by fascist regimes, okay? So it's kind of loosening the clamps of the Neutrality Acts, all right? So you can kind of see the timeline effect. All right, here we go. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Neutrality Acts today. Like I mentioned, I want to show you those videos then, and then maybe another assignment. Oh, okay, so the fall of France is due today. Hopefully everybody has that turned in. And then I might have you guys find a political cartoon that talks about the neutrality. You might find some that look very familiar, some of the artwork. Dr. Seuss, anybody? Yeah, he actually was, whoa, that's okay. Yeah, Dr. Seuss created a lot of political cartoons during his time. And you can kind of see the themes, and you can definitely tell it's his artwork, which is pretty cool. Cat in the Hat? Yeah. So what's up, America? What's going on? So as Churchill is really just holding on for dear life, right? Which I do have a trailer to the movie Darkest Hour, right? It's called Darkest Hour. It's all about Winston Churchill and his decision making and trying to keep Parliament in England together and saying, hey, we can't give up. We can't surrender. We can't give in to the Nazis, right? This is against everything Great Britain's all about. Again, they've been the strongest nation for a long, long, long time. And now they're at the brink of surrendering. They can't do it. So Churchill is pleading to the United States, begging them to get involved. And well, FDR, he can't really do too much. And there is like a phone call, which is interesting, which it actually happened. And there's a phone call between Churchill and FDR. And Churchill is saying, hey, we need help. We need your help in any way. And then FDR is saying, neutrality acts, I can't do anything. I'm sorry. It is what it is. You can imagine, there you are in despair. You're looking at your best friend saying, help me, please. And your friend can't help you. You feel like you're isolated then. You feel like you're on your own. Yeah, and that's exactly what Great Britain felt like. All right, so here's a good political cartoon detailing a little bit about the Neutrality Acts and isolationism. You guys remember in World War I, we talked about isolationism, interventionism, okay? And then we talked about internationalists, yeah? What's so fun? Huh? You hold it together? Are you thinking about this capital? Or stop it, please. All right, so with the political cartoon, you can see who's just sleeping in this bed, sound asleep, having a good time, having a good night's sleep here. Naomi? Yeah, representing the United States. Then, well, in the separate bed here, there's a lot of crap going on in here. Oh my gosh. What does it say? Hitleritis, Blitz, pox, Nazi fever. Oh my. I'm sure there's something about Bolshevism in there too. Yeah, so with that, the European bed doesn't look too good. No, not at all. There's a lot of disease, a lot of sickness there. And well, for us, we can stay separate because why? What's separating us between Europe? Jenna, what's separating us? Europe and America. Come on, help me. Oh, okay, water. Yeah, what ocean? Oh, oh, there we go. Good, nice. All right, so the Atlantic Ocean. Anyway, this is an idea where we'll stay separate, we'll stay isolated based off of this big ocean in between us, right? And even still to this day, it's one of the greatest defenses that we have, right? Have a body of water, thank God. All right, anyway, so many Americans actually oppose, right, getting involved in Europe, but you got to imagine, right, after World War I, you can think many Americans were saying that another war breaks out over there, we cannot get involved. That was brutal, it was terrible and awful, right? Also, the Dawes Plan, that was a great plan at first, but then what happened? The Great Depression, right? So did that just pull us down even further? Because we weren't getting our money back from these other European countries that we were helping rebuild. So that failed too. And it just pushed many Americans to kind of agree with the Neutrality Acts and say, we can't get involved. This is stupid. This is dumb. We need to stay separate. We need to stay isolated. All right. So with that, again, there's two different viewpoints leading into World War II. And really through the longevity of the 1930s, as they saw Hitler's rise to power, as Japan was, well, taking over huge portions of land in Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. It just seems like the world was burning and we were isolated, so we didn't really care, right? Many Americans thought that way. Like, well, who cares what's going on over there? We can just focus on us, right? We don't need to get involved in another war. And you can imagine, again, that's the isolationist idea. It's like, well, I mean, if we decide to try to trade with the Allied powers too, which at this point there's only Great Britain, that's only going to pull us into war, right? You got to imagine the Nazis probably have what surrounding Great Britain, preventing any type of goods and materials coming in. What do they got out there? It's no different than in World War I. It's a little bit more advanced. Jason, blockade. Okay, with what though? Yes, the U-boats, right? Submarines. Good. So if they get sunk, we're getting involved. Okay, we all remember the Lusitania, so, yeah, we can't let that happen. All right, interventionists, okay, this was a viewpoint in America, just stating that we need to stick with our allies. Right, this world is pretty darn big, and when you think about Germany, Italy, Japan, they're aggressive. They're strong when they're together. And as France is defeated, well, there goes one of our allies like that. Like I mentioned, a little over a month. That's all it took. Now Great Britain is just holding on by a thread. So we need to stick with our ally, right? So when it comes down to it, the two different mindsets leading into World War II, right? It kind of divided the nation. What do? Do we get involved? Well, we saw World War I, it was terrible. Or, I don't know, do we stay out? I mean, I don't know. So, as you can imagine, Neutrality Acts, many Americans did support it just because this was, again, a way for us to stay out of war. One thing though, if we are trading with other nations, going against the Neutrality Acts, I mean, that will give us a little bit of money, right? What were we going through at this time in the 1930s here, Alana? The Great Depression. So you can imagine, many of Americans were like, we got to get in just because, well, we want a better life here. We want to get our jobs back here. We want to make some money. And here's an opportunity, right? Here it is. But again, Congress says no. All right, so US steps closer to war. So the biggest thing here to know is that as we're getting later in the 1930s, as France is defeated, right? And as England, again, is just barely holding on, as Europe is pretty much controlled by the Nazis, well, Congress decided, well, we should ramp up our efforts here because sooner or later, we might get involved. So the Selective Service Act comes out again, right? And this is one of the first time we see a peacetime Selective Service Act, right? So again, we're not in war yet, not like in World War I where we had to ramp up our numbers. This time we're still at peace in a way, right? We didn't declare war on anybody yet, but we're kind of prepping for it. Again, we know that eventually, well, there might be an attack on American soil. There might be some sort of advancements by Nazi Germany or by Japan, who knows? And with that, our Congress decided to ramp up our numbers. Also, it gives the opportunity for England, the United States, to try to do something when it comes to trade, try to have some sort of negotiations and help Great Britain out. Because if they fall, well, all Europe then is going to be controlled by the Nazis. So it's going to be a lot harder to push back the Nazis if we don't have a vantage point here in Europe, right? England's going to be that vantage point. I will mention about it, the United States actually joins in North Africa first, all right? And that's how we're going to push back the Nazis. But if England goes, forget, right? There is no stepping stone, right? There is no launch point of an invasion to try to push the Nazis back and a break there. They call it the Atlantic Wall, right? So we'll see. So as you can imagine, by the late 1930s, the Neutrality Acts are just getting unhinged, right? They're starting to break. And it's allowing for the United States to trade with Great Britain, give them some sort of support, some sort of benefit, and hey, bring back American jobs. So Great Depression starting to wean off a little bit. All right, last thing here. We'll talk about the invasion of the Soviet Union here soon. Hitler decides to, well, really go after his true enemy, Bolshevism, as England is just isolated in the North Sea. So we'll talk about Operation Barbarossa a little bit later here, okay? So tomorrow I want to focus on how the United States actually gets involved, what event triggers that, but we'll talk this invasion, Operation Barbarossa, is the largest land invasion the world's ever seen. Over 3 million Nazi troops will be marching deep into the Soviet Union, and no one's ever seen anything like it. There's going to be a lot of death and destruction, and, well, horror as they march deep into the USSR. All right, again, so you imagine too, Germany realizes with this Lend-Lease Act, as the United States is starting to trade with Great Britain and give them support, the U-boats are on it, right? They are doing everything they can to try to eliminate these supplies coming in, just like in World War I. So yeah, that aggression is only going to lead the United States to get involved. All right, real quick, I'm going to finish here. Last thing here I want to mention. Your assignment, let's look at it here. Let's look. All right, so the Neutrality Acts of the 1930s. All you're going to do is, well, find a political cartoon that symbolically explains the Neutrality Acts of the 1930s. Again, there's a lot of divide over it. What do we do? Do we get involved? Do we not? And the Neutrality Acts say, nope, we're not getting involved. And it prevents the United States from trading with any country that is at war. Because if we do, we are getting involved. So I want you to find a political cartoon that emphasizes the Neutrality Acts of the 1930s. I'll open it up too. The Lend-Lease Act, if you want to do something on that too, go ahead. Right? So that's kind of unchaming the United States to trade with Great Britain. So again, find one. There are a few questions that I want you to answer based off of whatever political cartoon you find. Then just attach it to the assignment. All right. So make sure though it's the 1930s Neutrality Act. I've had in the past people find political cartoons that don't pertain to it at all. So where did you find this? Where did you get this? So you can look into it. So look into it, please. Yes, you're closing up your iPad, so let's hear this.
Why is it due? Because you pay full night.
Oh, I do have it set to night. Okay. I'm gonna do. How about Friday? Yeah. Okay. All right. Again, Fall of France. Make sure you turn that in. Sorry, guys, I didn't get to the videos here. My bad. Actually, maybe I can play one as the bell's gonna ring. Yeah, that'd be good.